Hi, I'm Greg Levine, and this is the party line for January 13th, Friday the 13th, 2012. What could possibly go wrong? I'll get to that in a minute, but first, out of context and off topic, I want to talk about out of context. Mitt Romney, I like to fire people who provide services for me. Somehow, now you can't report on that incident without saying that the quote was taken out of context. And I just gotta say, I don't think that term means what you think it means, news media. It is not out of context to report negatively on Mitt Romney saying, I like to fire people. I mean, I suppose what they're implying is that we don't understand that in the context he is saying that he likes to fire people for cause, that he likes to fire his health care provider because they didn't provide the service for him that he expected. And yes, I guess it's true. It would be worse to fire people, to fire people for no cause. But honestly, if you like firing people, cause or not, if you like firing people, you got a chip missing. Alright? That is not what I want from a leader. It's not what I want from anyone. It's not what I want from a boss. It's not what I want from a friend. Firing people, whether there's a reason to let them go or not, should not be something you enjoy. Ever. I think that's perfectly in context and a perfectly valid thing to criticize Romney for. Like there aren't like 150 perfectly valid things to criticize Romney for, and man, are the next 11 months going to be tedious. I'm not looking forward to this. Not from a, I gotta cover this, I gotta pay attention kind of angle. But let's get to the topic at hand, right? Clean, safe, too cheap to meter. You've heard me say that. You've heard the nuclear industry probably say that, especially if you are older than me, my age, something like that. This was the great mantra of atomic energy, the promotional sales pitch, really, the Madison Avenue tagline that the nuclear industry had. It's clean, it's safe, it's too cheap to meter. And of course nowadays, as I point out almost every week, it's none of those. It frankly to me sounds more like a taunt at this point. So unclean, so unsafe, so freaking expensive. And 2012 has provided our first set of examples for this. There are actually several in the news. You can look to Ohio and Davis Bessie for the unsafe as well as the not cheap department. But I want to talk about something that happened at the beginning of the year, which is that Citigroup has downgraded its stock evaluations for Exelon and Constellation Energy. Exelon is in the process of purchasing Constellation Energy. They've downgraded them from buy to neutral. And the reason, actually, Exelon, of course, you understand, is the largest owner of nuclear plants in the United States, and of course, one of Barack Obama's largest campaign contributors in the last cycle, in fact, throughout his career. Exelon, Constellation weren't downgraded, at least not this time, theoretically, as far as Citibank is saying, because of the problems with so many of their aging nuclear plants and the costs that they are about to incur to try and keep those suckers up and running. No, they were downgraded because this nation has gone frack happy, and we are pumping out so much natural gas right now that the price has dropped to a 2-year low. We have a glut of natural gas. It has made it so much cheaper than nuclear energy that nuclear energy stocks are not right now a good deal. Alright? Now, there are a lot of wrong messages you can take away from this, but the one I want to concentrate on is why is that the thing that's going to cause an energy company stock to be downgraded, or an evaluation of the stock to be downgraded? Well, it's because that's a real cost, a real issue of non-compete for them, whereas the actual costs of doing nuclear business, of running a nuclear plant, of generating power with nuclear energy, are ones that are really not felt by a corporation like Exelon. And the fact that, Citigroup will evaluate a company based on the marketplace and compare with natural gas, but not on what it actually costs to make nuclear power, just says reams about what the real cost of nuclear power generation is. Because, of course, as I've said a million times, right? You've got government loan guarantees, you've got state and federal tax breaks, you've got the whole issue of long-term waste storage, you've got cleanup from all the accidents, you've got the possibility that many improvements are going to have to be made, maybe post-Fukushima, to take into account some of the lessons we learned there. You're going to hear news in the next week about the NRC's rulings on this. It'll probably be mostly voluntary. It'll probably take like 10 years to see any results, as it did in our post 9/11 safety evaluations for nuclear plants. But anyway, all these costs not really factored in, and of course there is the whole issue of decommissioning plants, which came up this very week with Limerick, which is owned by Exelon. In Pennsylvania, they have, for each reactor, there's something called a decommission fund, which is that basically you have to sock away some money in the event that someday you will have to take that reactor apart, put it out of business, and hopefully put it out of everyone else's misery, which means that you've got to dismantle it safely. You've got to find a way to store all the moderately radioactive parts, and then you've got to entomb the reactor shell itself, because it is massively radioactive. And this costs, by the NRC's estimation, at least $300 million, and can take, well, they require them to finish within 60 years. So let's just say that's a really lowball estimate, and it's in contemporary dollars. And how lowball? Well, for instance, the fund required for Limerick is more than twice that $300 million right now. And the thing is that Exelon is short. They're a little light on the decommission fund. So what do? Well, they go to the NRC and say, help. And the NRC says, well, let's check. Why don't you first go to the Pennsylvania Rate Authority, or whatever it's called, and see if you can't get a rate hike, and pass the expense on to the energy consumers in Pennsylvania, who will now have to pay more for a form of energy they're already paying for a time when it is no longer actually delivering energy to them. And if you're still light, then of course we have federal programs that will have to make up the difference, because honestly, the alternative, like a half decommissioned or not well decommissioned plant, is really not an option. So right there, the real cost of nuclear power will out, and yet it won't out on the company, on Exelon's bottom line. It will out to the consumer, it will out to the taxpayer, one and the same, I guess. It'll out to the federal government, which is the sum total of the taxpayers, but doesn't affect Citigroup's valuation of Exelon, because hell, they got us, right? Natural gas, they can't do nothing about, but the cost of actually doing their job of generating nuclear power, we got their backs, I guess, whether we want to or not, which really should be taken into account when we evaluate how cheap nuclear power theoretically is. Because if we really were forced to evaluate from the mining and the cleanup from the mining, from the refining, from the delivery, from the long-term waste storage, from the security, from the large staffs that these plants concern, from the regulatory process, just phenomenally expensive. I can't stress enough how uncompetitive nuclear power is. And if we took only a little of the money that we spend backstopping the atomic energy industry and put it into efficiencies, like putting down new cable, like conservation programs, like investing a little bit more in true post-hydrocarbon, green, renewable alternatives, then we could really see like what a competitive energy marketplace looks like. And I wouldn't have to worry about a frack-happy country, because honestly, in the long term, that's going to cost us. It's kind of like another nuclear power in a lot of ways, but I don't have time to get into that right now. The message isn't frack more for cheap natural gas. The message is, look at what things really cost. Not just in, putting out the kilowatts or getting it out of the ground, but the whole lifespan of the whole project and what it really costs to the government and to the consumer. And you'll see where our priorities should be, and unfortunately where they're not. And that's the party line. See you next week.